Welcome to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang, currently sheltering in place in San Francisco. Another down day for the markets. This as Americans file record numbers of job claims. More than 10 million people in the United States have lost their jobs in just the last 2 weeks. Now, we are standing by for that daily White House press conference where the virus task force will give us an update. This as the number of infections in New York State has surpassed 100,000. The World Health Organization, meantime, is warning countries against stopping lockdowns too soon. We're going to take you to that press conference in Washington as soon as it begins. We're expecting President Trump to speak there at any moment now. Meantime, I want to bring in Romaine Bostick, our co-host of What You Miss. Romaine, you've been following the markets all day. You know, there have been some good days, but most of the days have been down days. What was driving the market today? Romaine, are you there? Looks like we've lost Romaine. So we are going to go now to the CEO of Google Cloud, Thomas Kurian, who is joining me now on the phone. Thomas, before I get to you, just want to show what the markets have been like for Google over the last month and a half. Google shares down 30% from a peak, but this has been a time of record business for you. You said you've seen unprecedented demand on Google Meet. That's your video conferencing service, if you will. Talk to us a little bit about how you've navigated a surge in demand, a surge in business, as all of your own employees have had to work from home.
Yeah, we've seen extraordinary interest in our cloud offerings, both our collaboration tools, our meetings product, and our cloud platform. You know, we moved our employees to work from home early, recognizing this was likely to be a global issue with the virus, and we've seen extraordinary growth in our meetings product. Just to give you a sense, 2 billion minutes of meetings per day. That's equal to, thousands and thousands of years of meetings are happening in a single day, every day. We've had enormous pickup from people who are interested in having a secure communication platform, governments, hospitals, educational institutions around the world. We have people using it in Peru, Italy, Madrid, South Korea, and every state in the United States. So we're seeing big growth, and we're helping retailers, manufacturers, media companies, all of them transition.
Now, as you said, this unprecedented surge in activity, curious how this translates into sales. I know you're giving away Google Meet for free right now, but any indication yet of sales growth when it comes to G Suite in general, which of course includes Meet, includes Gmail, Calendar, Drive, and Docs?
So we are seeing people asking us for full enterprise support and people shifting from using the meetings capability to broadening the use of the broader portfolio of G Suite. We're in our quiet period, so I'm not going to give you revenue forecasts. We're very encouraged by the adoption. Just to give you a sense, we've grown 25 times our user volume since just January. And we're growing, day to day. We're adding millions of users incrementally every day. So we're seeing lots of interest from different parts of the world. We broad brush are helping people, hospitals, governments, businesses, to tackle the virus and take the burden off their workforce, helping people drive supply chains and IT infrastructure to support just enormous growth. We're also helping industries manage spikes in consumer demand. We're seeing retailers, for example, seeing 25, 30 times volume of Black Friday on their e-commerce sites and in their logistics systems, which run on our cloud. And we're also helping, educational institutions, nonprofits support citizens work from home. And we're seeing a huge increase in governments wanting us to help them with social services, medical testing, scientific research programs. So there's an enormous number of these different activities we're doing in different parts of the world, not just in the United States, to support people through this very difficult period with the pandemic.
Meet, of course, competes with Zoom, and Zoom has gotten a lot of the mind share in the midst of this pandemic. Despite some security vulnerabilities, their shares took a big hit on that yesterday, but they recovered today. Do you feel like Zoom has kind of taken the wind out of the sails for Meet a little bit? And what can you do to compete and get some of that mind share on your side?
You know, we made our enterprise meetings product free for all organizations, educational institution, any organization through September. We've seen large growth in a number of industries. Healthcare organizations who are worried about patient data being not secure on other platforms. Governments, we're helping the governments in Italy, in Spain, in the state of Oklahoma. A number of places use our technology to offer social services and also run the governments themselves. We're seeing retailers. We helped one of the very largest retailers in Germany transition their workforce, over 100,000 employees, to using our meetings products so they could collaborate to keep their supply chain running. And we're seeing growth in medical institutions offering telehealth. So a variety of different places. We are very, very optimistic about the growth of Meet. We're seeing great interest from people. Our capacity is extraordinarily well managed. We have plenty of capacity for people. And because of that, when a city like New York City says, we'd like to offer 1.3 million students distance learning using your platform, we can provision them in a single day. So we are very confident in our product. We're confident that customers can use it with the same security they expect from Google, and we're optimistic for the future.
So speaking of that, since you mentioned G Suite for Education, there was a lawsuit filed yesterday that accuses Google of collecting biometric data on students and children without their permission. What is your response to that?
I can't comment on that. Google Classroom and Google Meet both meet the required security and privacy standards, and we've signed that contractually with many organizations, and we meet the required privacy standards in many, many countries. It's being used even before the crisis in many, many parts of the world. So I'm not going to comment on that specific question because of obviously the situation where we're working through that with the appropriate organizations.
Now, Thomas, there have been a lot of stories about private companies working with the government to help in efforts to tackle COVID-19. Curious, are you working with any government agencies to aid in their response to the virus or the tracking of the virus?
We've helped a number of organizations. I'll just give you an example. Oklahoma State Department of Health. We've built an application for the medical staff to engage remotely at-risk people who may have been, exposed to the virus. We built a mobile app to allow people to do that. We've worked with the government of Spain to provide a tool for citizens to self-assess if they've got coronavirus infection. We've helped the Australian Department of Health launch its coronavirus monitoring application called the Coronavirus Australia application. We've also helped in Asia to build a platform called Doctor Anywhere. It's a telemedicine service that runs on our cloud, and it offers consultation with locally registered doctors and medication delivered to the doorstep. We're seeing a 400% increase in volume of traffic through that. So these are examples, different parts of the world. We're also doing work with many medical research institutions to provide them the capabilities in machine learning in our platform to help further, identify ways to combat the disease.
Last question, Thomas. We don't know how long this is going to last. The shutdown is going to last. These work from home guidelines will last, but you have to have some sort of operating assumption about how long this goes on for. How long are you and your employees prepared to do all of this remotely? How long are you planning to do this remotely? Some CEOs are telling us it could be as long as 6 months before their employees go back to work.
We work with governments in each country where we have employees to understand what the rules and policies they have on people returning to work. We've also helped organizations. If you look at the first 2 to 3 weeks when the virus is detected as growing, expanding quickly in a country, most organizations ask us for business continuity solutions. So we have a full war room that's been running since January with support teams, et cetera, to help people transition to sort of a work from home and a business continuity scenario. But once you get through that first 3 to 4 weeks, you have to plan to run operations in a fundamentally different way for 6, 7 months. In some cases, people are worried that they have to run in a different way. And so we've seen, for example, grocery stores seeing huge spikes in their online systems because people are no longer going to restaurants and they have to shift the calories that they consume in a different way. So we've helped a number of grocers in different parts of the world build solutions. We're building out distance learning for people, assuming that schools are shut down for an extended period. So we've shifted rather than pick a date, because really it's not our job to pick the date. Governments will provide guidelines on that. Healthcare experts provide guidelines on that.
Okay.
What we are doing is helping people with technology prepare for an extended period if necessary.
All right, Thomas Kurian, CEO of Google Cloud. Thomas, really great to have your perspective on all of this, given how much the cloud has helped make this all possible. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to get back to our Romain Bostic now, our co-host of What'd You Miss, for a check on the markets. Of course, it was a down day today. Romain, talk to us about the biggest movers that you've been following.
Yeah, it certainly could have been worse. I mean, you have a market here that started off the week fairly positive, ended on a down note. We saw all the major indices on the day down about 1.5%, and on the week down 2 to 3%. When you look at the movers, though, it's an interesting sort of dichotomy here. We did see some of the tech names actually hold up this week. The strongest sector actually was not in the normal tech that we think of, the hardware, software, was actually in biotech this week. We saw the NASDAQ biotech index rise for a second straight week now, and obviously a lot of this is people making bets on any sort of potential advancements we get with regards to a coronavirus vaccine, as well as other healthcare measures, genetic testing, other things that may sort of be an outgrowth of the crisis we're in. So you talk about names like Insight, Regeneron, Vertex. You're talking about names up about 10% or so on the week. Also, though, we did see some names in the more traditional tech space also get bids this week, Emily. You talk about Akamai Technologies up about 5% on the week. VeriSign also seeing some pretty strong bids. And then, of course, some of the stalwarts like Microsoft moving higher by about 3% on the week. Citrix Systems also getting a pretty decent bid. Ended up only about 1% on the week, but most of the activity around these names in terms of the buying and selling, as well as some of the chatter that we've been hearing out of analysts, seems to suggest there are some pockets of this market that do offer some degree of defensiveness and maybe potentially, Emily, some degree of value.
All right, Romain Bostic, co-host of What'd You Miss. Romain, thanks so much for giving us that update there. We'll continue to follow, and again, we're waiting for that press conference to start at the White House any moment now. Meantime, speaking of big tech names, pressure has been on companies like Google, like Facebook, like Twitter, to crack down harder on misinformation in the time of the coronavirus, especially given that it is now a matter of life and death. I want to bring in the words from someone who has been called the closest thing that Silicon Valley has to a conscience, and that is Tristan Harris, the president and co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. Tristan, you recently came out with a Medium post in which you prescribed some things that you believe some of these tech giants should be doing right now, doing more of. You said it is time for us to abandon the fiction of neutral metrics and neutral engagement that's selected for the worst aspects of human nature. We need technology that acts more like a thoughtful journalist, a doctor, or other fiduciary agent that cares about the ethics of their choices. What more do you want to see from these companies right now?
Yeah, thank you, Emily, for having me. It's good to be back with you. The point that we made is that, this is the new public information infrastructure. We're now, if there was anything that was wrong with technology before, we're going to notice it a lot more now. So think of it like, ergonomics. If you sit in an unergonomic chair for 20 minutes, it's not really such a big deal. But when you live and breathe in that chair for 10 hours a day, you're going to start to really notice that ergonomics really matters. And the point of our work has been that technology is fundamentally the business model of these attention-seeking platforms that use clicks and likes to rank what information we see, has created a toxic information environment that we now know to be life and death as consequences if we don't get it right. And as we are now unavoidably reliant on this as our new public information infrastructure, it now is a public responsibility in the same way that, a public utility has that responsibility. And the point we made in this Medium piece is that, technology is the only actor, the only agent in the system that can skate to where the puck is exponentially going to be and can reach people faster than the virus can. The platforms, WhatsApp, Facebook, et cetera, especially in the developing world, reach 3 billion people that they can reach before the virus can. And a lot of people simply don't know, because the fundamental point is that our brains are not really well equipped to see exponential curves. That's why we were so late on this phenomenon, because our brains don't natively, nothing in our evolutionary environment with bananas and hunting things and hunter-gatherers ever had us seeing exponential curves. And now that we have to deal with that, technology companies have a moral responsibility. This could be things like WhatsApp saying, will you shelter at home, and letting you change your profile photo and then showing at the top of WhatsApp, 23 of your friends change their profile photo to say, I'm sheltering at home, to create a new social norm, letting us change our social profile photos to have a mask in front of it, because certainly in Western markets, wearing a mask is not a native norm. There's a lot of things that they can do to help basically save lives by changing the design choices.
Interesting. Now, as you say in this post, these companies should be doing more, not just to inform, but to persuade. The critics would say this is a slippery slope. When COVID-19 is over, what other views would they be pushing at us? Is this simply a unique situation right now? And do you see the danger that this could go too far, especially when it comes to other issues?
Absolutely. It could go too far. And in a way, it exemplifies the point that we've been trying to make for 5 years now, which is you cannot have asymmetrically powerful psychological manipulation technology wired up to commercial interests. Essentially, the technology companies have 21st century advertising micro-targeting technology, but on coronavirus, they've been deploying 20th century public service announcements. I was just on the phone with Dr. David Nabarro, who's a former UN envoy for Ebola, and he says that these public service announcements aren't working. They're boring, they're just facts, it doesn't work. And so technology companies have never been neutral. On the one side of the equation, they offer these non-neutral tools for advertisers to say people's brains are completely manipulatable and will, pay us more money because we're the best people in town to reach them. On the other side, they'll tell us and the public and government, no, we're just a neutral platform. People are just choosing on their own. We're not influencing their choices in any way. One of these things can't be true, and we certainly know which one is true, which is that their tools do influence people. The point isn't to say that they should just, start manipulating everyone in any old direction. It's that this is a notion that they should be serving the public interest, and they need to prioritize that, especially when it comes into conflict with business interests. We're going to see such enormous consequences taking place on these platforms over not just now, but the next, few weeks. I mean, imagine 4 weeks from now when the virus is peaking and you're going to see news feeds filled with posts about people who've lost loved ones. That is a new and unprecedented event, and they better, the reason that they need to shift to this position of responsibility is we want all of their engineers thinking about these consequences and preempting them and getting ahead of essentially what is the right way to present this, instead of simply saying fear and outrage and violence and, look at that, those guys are attacking and rioting on the streets, having that dominate our information environment, which isn't neutral at all. It's basically selecting for the amygdala or the fear processor of the human brain. So this is just kind of waking up from the fiction of neutrality and realizing all along they needed to do more.
Now, governments are already using things like location data to track the virus, to help people understand who they might have been in contact with over the last couple of weeks if they're diagnosed as positive. Does this concern you, or is that okay because it's in the interest of public health?
This is a very big debate and a very big and important topic, and we should be very wary about the powers that are ever handed over to technology companies. Once there's a history of handing over power, it's much easier to hand it over than it is to ever take it back. My understanding is that there's a bunch of privacy-sensitive and privacy-protecting efforts for what's called contact tracing that use Bluetooth sensors, and they never are stored on a centralized server, but instead use local decentralized ways of storing the information. That's being rolled out in certain countries, and we are seeing that the trials of that running in Singapore and in Iceland, and I think in Europe they're just starting to roll that out. There's a group at Stanford by Tina White that's been rolling this out called COVID Watch. I do think that we need this infrastructure because, unfortunately, you can't get people back to work without essentially contact tracing. The only countries that have been able to essentially, beat the curve and flatten it dramatically and get people back to work are the ones that have implemented contact tracing. And I think it should be a debate that we have to have about what power that's granted to tech companies. But there are already things that, let's say, Google Maps does use in aggregate. For example, what are the most busy hours of a store? Everybody sees that when they go to the statistics of a store that they're about to visit. They say 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock is the busiest time to visit, so you maybe want to come an hour later. Those are using aggregate statistics. There may be ways that they can use that kind of information to better monitor and advance hotspots where people are getting the virus, things like that. I think it's a very important conversation. I think it brings up the fact that this is the new public infrastructure. These are not products we use. These are the digital habitats and the digital infrastructure that we now are embedded in and live by. And just like you wouldn't want, a private company just running all the traffic lights and all the streets and designs of streets and where streets go and where the parks go in a city, you'd want there to be a public works department in a city that's responsible to the people. So that's what we need technology companies to be responsible to now.
All right, Tristan Harris of the Center for Humane Technology. Tristan, thank you so much for sharing your views with us. I do want to ask you one more question because we're going to move on. Tristan, thank you so much. A few weeks ago, I sat down with Julie Wainwright, who is the CEO and founder of The Real Real, the online luxury consignment market. It is just another company that has been pummeled. Shares have been pummeled along with the rest of the market. And we met them at their new physical store in San Francisco. I wanted to bring you a little portion of that conversation. This is the latest edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0. Julie Wainwright is focused on disrupting the online luxury consignment market with The Real Real, a company worth over $500 million, with over 2,300 employees, including more than 150 in-house gemologists, horologists, and brand authenticators, and about 15 million members. The company rose 45% in its first day of trading after a spectacular $300 million IPO in June 2019. But since then, there have been bumps in the road, including having to withdraw the company's outlook for the full year of 2020 as a result of the coronavirus. You took the company public, huge, very successful IPO. Tell me about that moment and what that felt like.
It was actually just a fabulous day and a fabulous moment and a critical milestone for the company. It raised our visibility, gave us the capital, and I feel good about being a public company.
At the high, the company has been worth $2.5 billion. CNBC did a big investigation about authentication at the company, and they say that they found hundreds of items that were faked. What went wrong there?
We are the only company that works incredibly hard to keep fakes off the market. We have great processes, incredible sophistication, a great QC team, but it's still mostly human driven. We use AI and technology mostly to get rid of bad consigners, and also note, what happens, especially during the holidays, fakes filter in through the system. For our gemologists, they have a lot more equipment. Some of it's highly proprietary. That one is very, very, very sophisticated. But when you're looking at a handbag, we have people looking inside, checking serial numbers. So do we make mistakes? Sure. Do we make a lot of mistakes? No. In October, we processed over 420,000 items. We actually had 20 items out of those that were suspect.
I want to read the statement that you put out. You said, The Real Real has the most rigorous authentication process in the marketplace. We are the only resale company in the world that authenticates every single item. There is no other resale company doing more to remove fakes from the market every day and put counterfeiters out of business. How many fake items do you catch, and how many fake items do you think you miss?
Well, we know in October we probably missed 20. But here's the most important thing for a consumer: you get a free return. We re-authenticate. We're not trying, I mean, our goal is to keep fakes off the market. Amazon reported in their last earnings, we have fakes that may hurt our business. It was stated as a risk to their business. That's not us. What we do is we try to keep them off. They're like obviously comfortable with keeping counterfeits on. That's not us. Our goal is we take responsibility for our platform.
Yeah. So how is Amazon's approach different?
I think you'd have to ask them. They come across as agnostic because there are counterfeits up there right now. The key for us is to really keep that trust going. We have a great customer service department. We're here to keep counterfeiters off the market.
How does technology help you identify a real Chanel bag or that a piece of jewelry is truly authentic?
It's easier on the jewelry because we have so many machines that measure alloy content, for example, this is where a gemologist should be here, talking about the refraction of the colors, understanding the origin of the gemstone. I usually wear a lot of Cartier bracelets. We know the alloy content. We know how they cut diamonds. You can look at the bezel. We have magnifying equipment and also refraction. So we have logs of all of this. So we can go through and you can say right away, fake, fake, fake.
And what about the bags? I've been to China. I've seen the markets. I've seen the fake bags. Some of the fake bags look and feel really good.
I'm not going to say it's not easy. It's very, very hard. It's very hard. We have skilled people. We have a lot of data. We use scales. We use black light. We have a lot of techniques that we use regularly, and then all that knowledge is stored and shared. But look, it is hard. I mean, counterfeiters get smarter. We have to get smarter. The jobs have changed in our operations center, and they will change. But it's also because we're automating what we can automate it to free up more time for deeper authentication.